Hello, everybody. It is wonderful to see so many of you here at the launch of the Timewise Flexible Jobs Index 2022. My name is Nicola Smith. I'm Director of Development and Innovation here at Timewise, and it is just great to have such a range of people from such a huge number of different sectors and professions on this webinar today. Many of you will know about our work here at Timewise, but for those of you who don't, we are a mission-led social enterprise. We're focused on doing absolutely all we can to build a stronger, more equitable jobs market with good flexible working at its core. We run social consulting with employers, supporting them with our expertise in real-world approaches to flexible job design and flexible hiring. We publish new research, making the case for change. We run a flexible jobs board, a key source of flexible vacancies for people across the country. And we run innovation pilots, showing the difference that good flexibility can make to employers' bottom lines and also to employees' health and living standards. I am so excited to be able to share with you today findings from our 8th annual index of trends in flexible hiring at such an important time for the UK's jobs market. As everyone on this call will know, we're facing difficult economic headwinds, but we're also facing huge labour supply challenges. And at Timewise, we know that good flexible working has to be a key part of the solution. As our press release showed yesterday, there are now at least 4 people chasing every part-time job across the economy. So what's the scale of the challenge? What progress has been made, and how can we work together to drive more change moving forward? I have got an amazing panel here with me today to help us answer some of these questions. Emma Stewart, MBE, co-founder at Timewise. Kate Shoesmith, Deputy Chief Executive at the Recruitment and Employment Confederation. Louise Woodruff, Senior Policy Advisor at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. And Nikki Elford, Programme Director at Lloyds Banking Group. I can't wait to get started, but first of all, a few bits of housekeeping. You will have noticed we're in webinar mode. That means that those of you watching us today are on mute and don't have camera access, but we really want to hear from you. So please share any observations, comments, links in the chat. You can put questions directly to the panel in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. And I'll be hosting a Q&A session after all the panelists have made their contributions. We also have Timewise colleagues here on the call today who will be able to answer any of your questions and share information about our work or wider labour market challenges in the chat. We're recording the session, so you'll be able to see a full recording afterwards, and we'll be sharing that with everyone who registered. That is all that I have to say by means of introduction to this event. So with no further ado, we're going to move on to our first speaker, Emma Stewart. Emma is a social entrepreneur with 20 years experience working with policymakers, with businesses and with people at work to tackle labour market inequalities. She's the co-founder of Timewise, and before that, Women Like Us, and a huge champion of flexible working. Many of you may have heard Emma discussing our index on Women's Hour yesterday, but for those of you who didn't, don't worry, she's here now to give us a full run through of the key findings and some wider research that we've been supported to undertake with employers on challenges and opportunities for flexible hiring. Emma, over to you.
Thanks, Nicola. Delighted to be here, and really looking forward to taking you through the findings of our latest index. I'm going to spend about 10 minutes just summarising what we have found and some headlines from the employer research that we have done to accompany it, and then some reflections from us at Timewise on the implications. Before I jump in, I just want to explain a bit about why we do this. So, as Nicola said, we're in our 8th year of running our Flexible Jobs Index. We do it because we know that there is huge demand for flexible working from people across the UK, not just those who are in work, but for those who critically are seeking work. They're looking for flexibility from day one. We also know that the government doesn't track the ratio of flexible job vacancies. It tracks the ratio of people in flexible work. And we also know that understanding this data really matters. It matters because the lack of good quality flexible jobs from day one is a problem for both businesses and for society. It's a problem that locks people out of work, and we know 600 or about 500,000 people have left the labour market since the pandemic. We need to attract them back in. It particularly affects parents, people with health issues, people who are older, people with disabilities, people who need to work differently to balance work with their life needs. And it also traps people in jobs, because once you've got flexible work, it's very hard to move out or to move up. It's a driver for the gender pay gap, and it's a considerable structural driver for low pay for particular groups as well. Yet we also know it's a significant opportunity for employers who want to tackle candidate shortages, skills gaps, and who want to maximise the skills of their workforce. So that's why we do it. I would also like, before I jump in, to say thank you to the organisations that have supported us this year to enable us to do this. Thank you to Lloyds Banking Group, who have been a sponsor of ours for many years, to help us continue this important work, and who are also a trailblazer, and you will hear from them in a bit on what they are doing around flexibility. Thank you also to Joseph Foundry Foundation, who have funded the wider work we have done with employers, and also the implications in terms of living standards that link to this. And then finally to our research partners, Institute for Employment Studies, Collaborative Research, like Class and Savanta, who have all supported us in this work. A reminder of the methodology before I start showing you the data. So we run our Flexible Jobs Index every year. It is national analysis of job vacancies. We scan around 6 million every year, and we are looking for job vacancies that reference flexible working at the point of hire. And that could either be just a general statement on flexible working, or it could say part-time, or it could say work from home, or it could say hybrid, or it could say other form of flex. We then analyse those vacancies by salary, we look at them by role type, and we look at them by location as well. Critically, we are looking at permanent roles here. We do not cover 0 hours, because we know that is part of the problem with poor flexible work. We are interested in the ratio of permanent flexible jobs. So that's what we do. That's how we do it, why we do it. I'd like to tell you what we found this year. So the key headline is, despite 2 years of the biggest turnaround in the way we work that we have had for decades, we still only have 30% of job vacancies that are open to flexible working from day one. Now, I say still, we've actually had a lot of progress in the 8 years we've been doing this. We have tripled the ratio of flexible jobs has tripled from 10% through to 30%. And that is good progress. But the pace of change is still really, really slow. We've only moved 4 percentage points up from last year. And we're concerned that that means that 7 in 10 jobs are really out of bounds for people who need to work flexibly and need to see that advertised in the job vacancy. We'll come on to why this is from an employer perspective in a bit. But if I talk to you about supply and demand, you'll see what this tells us is we have a mismatch between the supply of flexible jobs, which you'll see, and the demand from people who want it. So we know from our research that we estimate 9 out of 10 people in the UK want or have some form of flexibility in how they work. Of those, 5 in 10 people are currently working in some way flexibly. It could be informal, formal, or ways and means, but only 3 in 10 jobs offer flex. So we have far more people needing this than jobs available. And as I said, that is a problem for society, and that is a problem also for our economy and for businesses more generally. If we then look at the types of flexible work that's available, we have really focused this year on thinking about part-time as well as flexible working more broadly. We've done that because we are particularly interested in the fact that we have had a fundamental change in location-based flexibility, but we are concerned that there has been less focus on time-based flexibility in terms of how much people work. And this is reflected in our figures. You'll see here, still, we have only 12% of job vacancies say the job can be done part-time from day one. Whereas what we also know is we have a quarter of the workforce working part-time. So that is a considerable mismatch. And as Nicola said earlier, we estimate that around about 4 people are chasing every one part-time job. We estimate around 600,000 people are looking for part-time work now. And that compares to around 1 person for every 1 vacancy when it comes to full-time. We hope that is a wake-up call for businesses who are struggling to attract talent. If we look at other forms of flexibility, you'll also see specifically referenced home working is low. Sorry, if we go back one, and also you'll see there is very, very little reference to flexibility on when people can work in the context of being able to flex their shifts. And clearly that is a considerable concern for the 7 million frontline workers we have in the UK, who have to be on site to do their work, but who often want some autonomy and control in how they do that. If we move on to thinking about salaries, we have a perpetual problem with what I call the tale of two flexes. So you will see, if you are looking for flexibility in terms of location, so hybrid working or just working from home, you'll see in the middle column here, you are able to find jobs probably right across the salary bands and actually right up into very senior salary brackets. So hybrid effectively equates to professional roles. If we think about part-time, if you're looking for part-time, you are predominantly hunting in low paid, low quality part-time jobs. So the majority of part-time jobs are actually under 20k in terms of 22%. And that is quite shocking. And again, in terms of implications for employers, if you are thinking about taking a fair and inclusive and a consistent approach to how you enable people to work in the context of flexibility, recognizing different ways of enabling people to work flexible is going to really, really matter. And particularly, as I said earlier, in the context of the gender pay gap, because we know that a lack of senior, flexible and particularly part-time roles does trap women in low paid roles. So moving on to sectors. This is a busy graph. Again, there's a lot more context of this in the report, but just to summarize for you, what we wanted to do this year was to try and look at what are the patterns that exist across different sectors and different types of flexible working. So down the left-hand column are the sectors that we look at when it comes to job vacancies. Again, a bit of a caveat, people tend not to advertise a job by sector, they advertise it by the type of job, so we cluster based on these broad sectors. But what you'll see here, again, if you think about part-time working, it is very, very low in professional service roles. So just to call out a few here, if you look at IT, if we look at legal, and if we look at even marketing and PR, we have only around about 4 to 6% of those roles are available on a part-time basis. And then interestingly, if we also think about my point about frontline industries, if you look at the third column along, to what extent are industries offering some form of flexibility or saying they're open to some form of flexibility on different ways of working when it comes to start and finish or advance notice on shifts or input into shifts? It's incredibly low, it's minimal. And we know that, again, that is a considerable issue at the moment. And those industries are also really struggling for talent. If we move on to why all of this is happening. So again, lots more in the report about different sectors, different pay grades, et cetera, et cetera. But this year, for the first time, we were really fortunate in that we were able to get support from Joseph Andrew Foundation to do some polling with 1,000 businesses, particularly hiring managers, decision makers, on why is the pace of change so slow? What is it that is stopping you from thinking about offering flexible working to somebody at a job interview and critically saying so, advertising that in your job vacancy? And Louise will talk a bit more about some of the sort of implications from this research in a bit, but I just want to call out 3 main themes that are coming through in terms of barriers. So you'll see these were all the questions we asked and these the ratios of answers. But 3 things that came out for us. One is there's a real issue around trust, which is we know that if you look at the main reasons that employers are saying they won't put it on a job ad, it's because they either want to see, work with, or get to know a candidate first in the context of their role before they offer them flexibility. Now, the net aggregate of that means actually around about half of the people we spoke to said that they wanted the candidate to prove themselves and to be in the organisation before they were able to agree to this. That is a real concern for us, and it's a concern for many, many job seekers, because if you don't advertise that you are open to that conversation, still a lot of people looking for work will not necessarily approach you or apply for the job. Now, there's lots of very confident candidates and all sorts of candidates that might ask, but if you're at the lower end of the labour market, it's a particular worry. And in fact, we know from wider research that around 2 in 5 women still don't feel confident in being able to ask. So the risk to employers is if you're open to it, and you want to have that conversation and negotiate it, please do say so, because if otherwise you will not get the candidates walking through the door. Two other themes. One was around inertia, which is we just do expect people to ask. We're not necessarily going to offer or feel the need to say so, or we just hadn't thought of it. Now that again is a wake-up call for us, because we know that many businesses are desperate for talent at the moment. And if you are open to it, just saying so will make a big difference. And then thirdly, a theme around just struggling to know how to do this. And this is a theme that comes up time after time when it comes to managers thinking, if I am going to offer flex, what kind of flex can I offer? Is it 4 days? Is it 3 days? How many days can this job be done? Where can this job be done? It is complex. There's also an issue around consistency. But if these aren't addressed, and they can be addressed in the context of training, then we're not going to be able to move past this. And our message to businesses is, many of you can't afford not to try and look at how to support your managers in this way, because you will support your managers with lots of other training around leadership and management skills. So those are the sort of three main themes. We then asked businesses, what would incentivize change? What would make a difference? What would encourage you to think about advertising roles as flexible? So if we look at the next slide, again, three main things that will come out from this. The first is there is a really, really strong theme around just give us examples. Give us examples of how this works either within our organisation that we can use to persuade our leadership team. Give us examples of other organisations. Give us case studies. So information out, there is information out there. We have a huge amount on our website, but there's clearly a need for more awareness raising even now around the benefits and how this can be done. Secondly, there is an interesting challenge around the business case. So some firms telling us they need more data. They need to see that the effort of doing this is worth the return. Again, we've got lots of evidence on that. But there's also something linked to that. You'll see the second point down around tax incentives, which is, can businesses get help to do this? Are there ways that you can invest in, try this when you're nervous about the operational consequences? And that, again, will come to, but I think is a consideration for government in terms of what support could be available for businesses. And then the third theme that comes through, again, is we need some support for our managers. So 1 in 6 organisations saying, actually, we would really like some help. Just a little call out for those of you interested in policy on this. Only 3% said the law would have to change for us to do this. That is really interesting in itself. We'll come on to talk about legislation and whether the government will legislate for day one rights for people working flexibly. But it's really interesting that actually businesses need help. It's not just about legislation. It's about getting the help to be able to do this, and that far more of them are open to doing this if they got better support and help, not just waiting for the law to change. So that's what employers have told us. I'm just going to, before I finish up, I just want to come back to part-time work, because again, for us, we've really focused on it this year with both the index, but also the wider research we've done. And it's really just a note around living standards. And it's a reflection, again, for employers on what they can be doing to support living standards, because we know this is a really, really major issue for many people at the moment. We know from our index data that if you are looking for part-time jobs, there are very few of them advertised as part-time. We know that most of those are low pay. And what we also know is that that is reflected in the employment market. We know that twice as many people who are working part-time are likely to be in low pay than full-time workers. You are twice as likely to be in low pay if you're working part-time. And that's not because you're working less hours, that's because your hourly rate of pay. And that is a considerable driver for people being trapped in low pay and for not being able to raise their living standards. But we did some really interesting research with the support of Institute for Employment Studies this year, again, backed by Joseph Rowntree. And if I show you the next slide, you'll see what was really telling for us is that a considerable proportion of those people who are in low paid part-time jobs are effectively overqualified for those jobs, and they're being underutilized. So on the left-hand column, you'll see here, and again, lots more in the report, but a very brief breakdown of the gap in hourly pay between somebody who's working part-time and somebody working full-time based on qualifications. So if you have a high level, like a sort of degree level of qualification, you are still likely to be around £3 an hour worse off if you are choosing a part-time job than a full-time job, which is pretty shocking. And the implication of that is we estimate from this research around 500,000 people who need to work part-time. So they will be parents, older workers, people with disabilities or health issues. They want to work part-time, who have the qualifications to be able to earn a decent salary, but are either out of work or trapped well below their pay grade. And that is 500,000 people, if we think about it the other way, that employers, if they could unlock more of their quality jobs to part-time, could attract back into work and could also have a direct impact on the living standards. So employers could have a direct impact on the living standards of thousands of people if they just considered jobs, better jobs that they are advertising now to be open to part-time or even job share. So there's a big implication there on living standards as well as on tackling the tight labour market. And I'm just going to close with a few sort of reflections and takeaways, and then I'll hand back. We'll have a discussion with the panel. The implications for us is we have a real opportunity to encourage and to raise more awareness still to businesses about the benefits of advertising flexible work from day one. We're still only 3 in 10 job vacancies. Please remember that flexibility means part-time, not just hybrid. You have four people for every 1 part-time vacancy at the moment that are looking for work. We have, if we are able to unlock more quality part-time as well as flexible jobs, a route to widening the candidate pool for businesses, for enabling businesses to maximise the skills of the people that are currently working for them. So by internally progressing them as well as externally hiring in. And we also have a way that we can really help address living standards. But this will require proactive input from businesses. Businesses do need to support managers, will need to source, and again, we can help examples from elsewhere, provide them to their own leaders and managers to encourage them to do this. And it also requires an organisational change approach. Again, lots of detailed recommendation advice on our report. And then finally, our thoughts for government is legislative change on this for day one rights is overdue, but we also need some investment to support businesses to be able to train their managers to be able to do this properly. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Emma, for sharing all of that insight. That was great. Before I move on to the next speaker, I just had a couple of sort of factual questions. It might be helpful if you could pick up. Would you be able just to tell us a little bit more about the breadth of types of flexibility we're talking about and how we describe flexible working at Timewise? And also I've had a question about how many roles were analysed for the report. If you could just give people a very brief overview of how we pulled this report together.
Absolutely. So in terms of types of flex, so we've sort of have an algorithm that we use, that we run the data with Lightcast. So we scan around about 120 job boards that are advertising vacancies, and we also have a process for managing sort of duplication, so we can cut them out. We look when we talk about flexible work, the checks that we do are looking at just general statements around flexible working considered, through to part-time, through to job share, compressed hours. So it'd be all the standard that you understand from a flexible working policy. And also we avoid and discount obviously things where it says flexible salary considered or something. So it's specifically looking at all types of flexible working that are advertised in the job vacancy. And critically, it has to be on the job vacancy. This is not about career pages and websites for employers. In terms of volume, I think this year it was around about 6 million. It's basically reflective of the number of vacancies in the market, and we do it in the first quarter of the year. So we cut it every year at the same time. For the last couple of years, we have also done it twice a year because the market was so fluctuating in the context of the pandemic. So I hope that answers.
That's great, Emma. Thanks so much for providing that feedback. And there's so much to discuss there that I'm sure we'll pick up on more in the Q&A after we've heard from the rest of our speakers. But with no further ado, I am now going to move on to our next speaker. I'm delighted that we have with us Kate Shoesmith, Deputy Chief Executive at the Recruitment and Employer Confederation. Kate leads REC's external engagement strategy. She is a leading voice across the recruitment industry and has a long-standing career in public policy and public affairs. Kate brings huge insight into the state of the current jobs market and also the importance of flexible hiring at the moment. So welcome, Kate, and really looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. It's great to be here. We're such big supporters of Timewise work. the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, where I work, we're the professional membership body for the UK recruitment industry. Very proud that Timewise is one of our members. And I suppose one of my jobs here today is to give a bit of the number crunching and the data that really endorses everything that Emma has just been speaking about. So as you would expect, we represent over 3,000 recruitment businesses in the UK. That's about 80% of the market by value. And we've never known a jobs market like it. I've been working at the REC for coming up for 10 years actually now. But for the last 25 years, we've collected jobs data via something called Report on Jobs, which IHS Markit, owned by S&P, does for us. And every month that reports on recruitment activity, placement rates, candidate availability. And when we came out of the lockdowns in 2021, we had the lowest candidate availability we'd seen in 25 years of doing the monthly report. And we've never seen anything quite like it. So Emma talked about the missing 500,000 people from the jobs market. It was absolutely the case. When you feel as employers that it's harder to recruit, that you have labour and skill shortages, we know factually that there really were those labour and skill shortages. And we also know that demand was at a super high rate in terms of the jobs that were being created, the pent up demand to recruit for different roles that had been stifled during the pandemic, now being brought to the fore. That job demand is still really high. We still have a higher number of job vacancies than we did pre-pandemic, and we still have fewer hours worked than we do pre-pandemic. So for businesses, candidate availability, labour and skill shortages are a critical issue. And if we're not looking at flexible working, we're missing out on a massive part of the jobs market, and we're never going to be able to fix some of these labour and skill shortages. And over the summer, we did some work into it to say, what is this costing us? So based on a continuation of the labour demand that we were seeing, hypothetically, but like trying to do some economic modelling and thinking it's all through, we figured out that by 2024, labour and skill shortages were going to be costing the economy anywhere between 30 and 39 billion pounds in lost GDP. So to not do something about this jobs market is undermining all of us. And yes, I think to Emma's final point about where's the legislation on this, is important, but there's also a business onus around all of this. And what we did is we spoke to some employers around, what are you doing? What's actually working in practice? And I know that times are particularly tough, and that for many employers, what they've had to look to do is to think about wages and how are they paying people in order to attract them in this candidate short market. But when we talk to recruiters, as we do all the time, they're now telling us, and they have been for at least the last 12 months, that actually the number one request from candidates is around flexible working, and that they will put that above pay conditions and about what's out there. That will be their key request. I actually saw a poll that LinkedIn ran this morning that said around 50% of job applicants are going for roles that are advertising flexibility, but only 15% of those job adverts on LinkedIn say that they're flexible. So whilst we can think that, yes, there is something for government to do, and it'll be really interesting to see where the current private members' bills get to through the next few months around day one rights to request flexible working, which we think is a really important step forward. There's something about what do we need to do as a business community if we just simply do not have enough people to fill the jobs that are available right now and that are being created for the future. So on that, the key points for us would be, actually, if you want to attract people, make sure that you do advertise upfront. Have that really in-depth conversation about why you're not advertising a role with flexible working. Is it true that it can't be done flexibly? When I look at the what's happening in terms of the recruitment and the supply of staffing to the NHS, the reason that nurses are saying to us that they want to work for an agency is because they cannot get flexibility any other way. That's costing us as an economy, it's costing us as a society. So we really need to think about how we're building in flexibility no matter what the job is, because otherwise we're not paying attention to what people are actually saying to us. And the big finding from all of our economic modelling around labour and skills shortages, we called our report Overcoming Shortages over the summer. The big finding was that really simple message: if you're not putting the people stuff first, you are missing out as a business. And that's on us as businesses. It's not just something for government to enact. So with that, Nicola, I'm aware we're short of time and we've got so many great questions coming in. So very happy to hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Kate, for sharing that insight and really making a very compelling case for why this matters right now. Let me hand over. I should also say I can see there's some questions in the chat coming in, and I think we'll come back to those at the end because they probably need a bit more of an involved answer. And I am now going to move on to our third speaker, Louise Woodruff, Senior Policy Advisor at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Louise brings huge long-standing knowledge and expertise in pay and employment trends and has led and supported a really large number of programmes and projects that promotes the Joseph Rowntree's ambition of solving poverty in the UK. As Emma said, JRF provided us with vital support for this research, and I think Louise is going to take this opportunity now to share some of her reflections on why it matters, both for our economy and our jobs market, and also for the people who JRF care about most. Thanks. Over to you, Louise.
Oh, thank you very much, Nicola, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for Timewise for putting this event together. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation is a charitable foundation. We're based in York, and we fund and develop our own policy, partnerships and analysis to solve UK poverty. Thank you to Timewise as well for such an excellent piece of research and all for the ongoing work to transform flexible working in the UK. And that just can't happen without employers on board. And it's great to have so many employers taking part this afternoon and to see those questions popping up in the chat. So today I wanted to cover why we think flexible work and quality part-time work is so important and reflect on some of the research findings. And just stepping back a bit, JRF supported this work from Timewise because we know flexible working and quality part-time work are part of the solution to UK poverty. So solving poverty is what we care deeply about, and the British public care deeply about it too. It's important for all of us. So we know that 1 in 8 workers before COVID pandemic and the cost of living crisis were in work poverty. And so gone are the days where work is always a route out of poverty. We know that disabled workers, single parents who are mostly women, and workers from certain BAME groups all have a higher risk of in-work poverty. If we look at sectors, it's quite interesting to see Emma's chart there of different part-time and full-time roles across different sectors. The accommodation and food services has the highest in-work poverty rate, with nearly 1 in 4 workers in that sector experiencing poverty. And you can see that reflected in the high level of part-time, low-paid roles in the sector. So the cost of living crisis has hit low-income working households really hard. And if JRF research shows that when you're on a low income, being in a working household does not make a significant difference to your chances of escaping debt and also going without the essentials, which can include food and heating. So we have a real cost of living crisis, as I'm sure all of you know, over this winter, and built on a whole set of factors that happened before the current drivers of that crisis. So we need to get out of it, and we need to find ways to support people who are experiencing poverty. And when we work directly with a whole set of experts who have that lived experience, many of them say to us that flexible working is really, really important. It's part of the solution. And it's really, I think, important that we start and listen to employees, to workers, to people who can't work, are not working, or feel that they aren't getting what they need out of the labour market, and also start there as well as part of our solutions. So whilst we need the government support to do a lot of the heavy lifting to help people with incomes and with poverty, the labour market has to play a role with a real boost in job quality, and that includes better quality flexible jobs. So this new report really backs up that argument. As Emma said, nearly twice as many part-time workers earn below the threshold for an acceptable standard of living compared to full-time workers. So many people in low-paid, part-time jobs have the qualifications to earn more, but those jobs aren't available. However, if you're constrained by health or care, you need to look part-time, and therefore people get stuck in low pay and in work poverty, as so few quality part-time jobs are out there for people. So this is all part of our anti-poverty strategy as a country. It's really kind of linked in, and if we're thinking about what we can do as companies and firms and employers to make a difference, this is definitely one of those levers. But moving on to another really related but extremely important problem that Kate talked about as well, we really do have one of the weakest recoveries post-COVID across across the world. So driven mainly by older workers leaving the workforce and long-term health. And actually last month, we found the data shows that 2.5 million people, working age adults who could be in work, are out of the labour market because of ill health, and that's hit that level for the first time. So we just simply do not have enough people in work. And as we heard, that we have chronic labour and skills shortages. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, the chief economist of the Bank of England actually warned in a speech that the surge in people leaving the labour market could force the Bank of England to further raise interest rates. So this is real concern to the economy, to individuals, and to employers and businesses. So whilst it's essential that government invests in employment support, we really need to see a more holistic approach where the types of jobs are on offer also change. It's no use investing in lots of support to help people move back into work if those jobs are not there in the numbers. So people just still will not be able to work if we don't see a change in the types and design of jobs available. But as we've heard as well, this is a really big ask for employers, especially at a time when so many of you are facing real cost challenges on a number of fronts. So how do we shift the dial? So I think the new research shows that some employers really get flexible work, and there is some great practice out there. Many of you, I'm sure, have that to share. We will hear some examples later on in this webinar. So there's some really progressive employers out there really getting this as being part of their kind of corporate social responsibility. But the gap is too wide, and we need to have far more employers on board and at a quicker pace. I think we are at a point now where we're seeing more support for new employment legislation on flexible working. Employers have the opportunity to get ahead of the curve, essentially. So because I feel that that is going to come, and we're as supportive of that at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. So I think some of the findings show that we need to invest much more in better quality management, where managers have the time and skills to feel confident at recruitment, job handling requests, job design stages. We also need them to drive workplace cultures which support care and health and build more solidarity amongst colleagues rather than being fearful of what other team members' reactions are. And after all, the vast majority of us will need to manage care and or ill health before we retire, even if we are not experiencing those challenges now. So overall, it seems a win-win to me. Flexible work can help fill those skills and labour gaps, and at the same time help more households move out of poverty. I think it is striking that for workless single parents, we'd see a fall in poverty rates from 70 to 10% by being able to move into a decent part-time job. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Louise. Such a huge range of information that you shared there, really making the social case for why good flexible working matters so much across the jobs market, and also for how much more there is to do. I'm going to move swiftly on to our next speaker. I'm really delighted to have Nikki Elford here from Lloyds Banking Group. She directs their We Are Agile campaign there and has enormous expertise in agile working, in flexible working, in diversity and inclusion issues. And Lloyds have been huge champions of flexible hiring and flexible working, and Nikki's got some really interesting examples of what they are and have previously done, what they are doing and have previously done that she can share with us now, and that I think will show how this can work and does work in practice. Over to you, Nikki. Really look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thanks, Nicola, really appreciate it, and great to be here with everybody this afternoon. I guess the first thing I would say is we're passionate about flexible working and building agility into our business, but we're by no means experts yet. You know, we're still on that kind of journey of trying to find the right balance of getting, you know, the right people in the right place at the right time. Lloyds is a big and complicated organisation, you know, 60,000 permanent colleagues and a large number of contractors as well, across 14 brands in lots of locations. And we're trying to make sure that as we develop our thinking from a business strategy perspective, we're really thinking about the sort of talent we need to attract into the business to deliver that strategy, but also the people that we really want to retain and make sure we don't lose from our business. So we look at flexible working across 4 dimensions. We look at when people work, where they work, how they work, and who's doing the work. And I guess what we found during the immediate post-pandemic period, we were very, very focused on where people were working. How do we get this kind of hybrid working thing right in our business? And I have to admit, we were guilty of the overlooking as much focus on the kind of the when and the how parts. And we're trying to put that right now. We spend a lot of time talking to leaders in the business about their business priorities. And what we found is, in order to get traction and make real change in our organisation, we have to find ways of engaging that are as exciting to the finance and ops directors as they are to the people directors. And we look at creating benefits through the ways that we work across kind of 3 sort of clear segments, I guess. We look at how are we creating benefits for our customers that want to access us in different ways at different times of the day. How are we ensuring that, as we're not a charity, we're doing things that are kind of business sensible, but most importantly to us, how are we meeting the expectations that are really changing of our employees, of our workforce? So we've started to build out a framework, I guess, of how we look at flexible working. And we're looking at it across kind of 4 dimensions. The first of those is to really challenge our role design. We've got an organisation that's largely built on a model of work, which is all roles add up to 1 FTE. And that's led to real challenges around part-time workers and creating progression for part-time workers. I think we kind of talked to Emma's point of view in that we do have just about a quarter of our workforce that are part-time workers. They work reduced hours, but they're largely we've got 8 grades in the organisation, and they're largely in the first 4 grades of our organisation, which means once you get to that kind of 4th level in the organisation, there's nowhere to go unless you're prepared to change the way you work. And that's just not possible for everybody or desirable. So we're really focused in on how do we change that role design so we can make roles more modular, and then we can build them up in ways that enable people to work the way they need to do, and for us to attract the talent we want to. In that same role space, we also want to get a lot clearer on and a lot more transparent on the way people can work in different roles. So we're quite good at making sure on all of our job adverts there's a nice generic statement to tick the kind of flexible working box. You know, we're happy to talk to you about flexible working, but we've not been so good at being really overt about the types of flexible working you can do for this role. And we know that puts some talented potential candidates off because they're thinking, oh, I'm not sure whether I feel brave enough to ask about reduced hours or compressed hours or split shifts because I need to do something in the middle of the day on a regular basis. So we're going to get better at that. We've also spent a lot of time looking at how can we empower and trust teams in our business. So if we're going to really be flexible, rather than kind of a rigid sort of flexibility, we have to get better at trusting our people, and we have to allow our teams to agree the rhythms that are going to work for them. So when we're looking at days in the office or core working hours where we might be able to collaborate and have team meetings, we need to get better at empowering our teams to actually make those decisions and meet their business and customer needs off the back of those. The third dimension that we're starting to spend a lot of time on is looking at life stages and really starting to think about different people need different things at different life stages. So how can we make sure that our organisation attracts and retains older workers in the same way as we put lots of attention on attracting people fresh out of education? And then the final piece, I guess, is the culture of the organisation. And we really want to change our organisation. So we talk about flexibility. So those are the kind of the 4 areas we've started to look at. We've built a plan. The focus very much next year is reduced hours, older workers and age inclusivity, and flexibility. But I know we're sort of pushed for time. So at that point, Nicola, I'll hand back to you, and I'm happy to take any questions as they come. But that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through what we're doing at Lloyd's.
That was just great, Nikki. Thanks so much. It gives us a real insight, I think, into the need for organisation-wide strategies and to think about job design as well as flex hiring, and also the breadth of types of changes to work that you're talking about when you talk about flexible working. So thank you so much for sharing that example. And I'm sure we'll have lots of questions, and I've already had lots of questions, in fact. So we've got just under 15 minutes left, and I'm going to try and get through as many as I can with the help of my fabulous panel. So I'm going to direct the first couple to Emma, because Emma, we've had one question in the Q&A about how we can drive this sort of change, I'm summarising, but without overloading managers who are already facing really significant challenges. And another in the chat, which is really about whether we're starting to see changes across a range of sectors and whether particular institutions are making shifts. So if you could maybe speak a little bit to those key points, that would be great.
So on the manager point, absolutely. Well, the first thing I would say is we need to invest in training managers to know how to do this, because they're often overloaded because they're given challenges and no support to work that through, and we should be doing that. And actually what we found from many of the organisations that we work with is when you do train managers, they often really embrace the challenge. And what is really critical within that is managers who are confident and comfortable with consulting with their teams to find solutions. Because the thing about flexible working is we've got to move away from I'm going to ask my manager and I want my manager to say yes, and I'm not going to worry about the rest of the team. So this is about actually having really good management skills broadly and making flexible working complex teams. And, you know, we've done this on construction sites, and we've done it in schools around the country, and we've done it on wards with nurses. So it's possible to do. But that's about making sure that your managers are supported, your managers are trained, and also that teams are established to enable all change to happen, which is my point more broadly. It shouldn't just be completely the onus of a manager. They need wider support as well, and leadership interaction. And sorry, Nick, could you say the second question again, just briefly?
It was, I think you've answered it. It was, how do we ensure that managers can do this at the same time as being supported? And also, what evidence is there of wider change across a breadth of sectors? And I think you've spoken to both those. Both those points. Thanks, Emma. I'm going to move on to a few questions for Kate now. We've had a few questions coming up about whether or not, questioning whether there's an age breakdown for people who want flexible working, and also asking about tackling ageism in recruitment, particularly given those larger numbers of older workers that we are seeing leaving the labour market altogether, and the challenges that Louise talked about. Kate, and then maybe also Nikki, given your work. Kate, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about your views on those topics? Is flexible working something that only one age cohort want? And what more can we do to stop people making judgments about older workers?
Yeah, I think the key thing is your final statement there, isn't it? Don't make any judgments. We don't know until we have those conversations, and it's really important. Using a data that's a little old, it's pre-pandemic. We did a YouGov poll before the pandemic, as I say, where we were asking people why are they working. In our case, it was in temporary. Why were they taking temp roles on? And they were saying to us that there were 4 key categories. And one is that you are going into a new area of work. So it could be that you are younger and you want to try something out, but it could be that you just want to try a new sector and a new occupational area, and actually doing a bit of freelancing, contracting, temping was a good way to get your foot in the door. There was obviously the cohort of people that have caring responsibilities. They were a big group that were saying, actually, this is why we're working this way, because it's the only way we can find that work-life balance. The third group were students that are saying that they're working this way because they're balancing it with their studies and their education. And the fourth group was the older workers. And it was people that had had a career in a particular sector and were choosing to take a step back, or were having to take a step back. Now, we often speak about a squeezed generation, and this has become a huge phenomenon over the course of the pandemic, where we've got a group of, which is where we're getting this, when we're talking about 500,000 people walking away from the jobs market and becoming economically inactive. We've got people that have caring responsibilities on both sides. So they may be supporting their families by taking on grandchildren caring responsibilities and helping their kids with that. They may also have elderly parents to care for. They may have other points in their family where they need to be around for that. And they're taking that step back from work because they simply cannot balance it all. So we knew from that those groups, and it's not just one age group, are choosing to work in a different way, are having to make that choice. And wouldn't it be great if employers weren't making them having to make that choice, that there was something else available to them? And in terms of how you address it, we spent some time working with the Centre for Ageing Better around guides for good recruitment practices when it comes to older workers. And there's some really simple things. Read your job descriptions and read your job adverts and think, does that apply to everybody? And is there anything in that might put somebody off? And there are certain keywords and phrases that are all important avoiders. If you're talking about somebody who is youthful, energetic, bubbly, dynamic, does that sound like me? Does that sound like it could be anyone? There are certain words that just put other people off. So really think through what's in these things, and then think through the whole process so that it's open to everybody. But there's lots more in the guide.
Thanks very much for those tips, Kate. That's great. And Nikki, there's a question specifically for you in the chat about hearing a bit more about what the emphasis is on flexibility in Lloyds, but also maybe if you could speak a little bit to your experiences of supporting older workers.
Okay, yes, no problem. So I guess what we're starting to do in Lloyds is we've just set up a colleague advisory panel that we're calling Life Stages, which allows colleagues at all life stages to come and help us shape our policies, our processes, our new recruitment packages, because different people need different things at different points in their lives. So that's kind of the first thing we're doing. The second thing we've introduced for colleagues that are starting to think about life after kind of full-time corporate world, what comes next. And it's not always retirement. You know, lots of people can't afford just to retire, so they want to think about life differently. And we've introduced kind of a midlife review, for want of a better word, and then lots of specific support, enabling colleagues to get insights around, you know, financial advice, health and well-being advice, career advice, and some sort of online sort of modular activity around how do you work out what you want to do next, and how do you prepare for that. And I guess we're also starting to think about things like returner programs and apprenticeships aimed at different workforces other than sort of parents returning from paternity leave, or younger colleagues thinking about apprenticeships. So those are the sorts of things that we're looking at in that space. And in the flexibility space, for me, that's very much a cultural change program, and that's never an easy activity to list out in a couple of moments. But for us, it's about the language we use, the way we recruit, the role models we have at senior levels in the organisation, so we can actually see representation at every level and shout about the value that different types of workers provide. It's about making sure that we have delivered year on year new training for managers around sort of flexible working, not just one training program we did 5 years ago and we've got the badge and we're not going to worry about it, but every year refreshing that. And like I say, enabling team and manager and individual conversations in a way that it becomes completely normal to talk about working in a flexible way. And actually the abnormal thing is the person that just works Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, sat in an office. That's kind of the target for us.
Thanks, Nikki. Really succinct summary. That's great. I've got a question now for Louise, which is really, can you tell us a bit about who actually needs flexibility and why they need it? We've had references to young workers, to older workers, but what are some of the reasons people say they need flexibility? And just for all the panelists, we've got 5 minutes left now, so if we could just keep the responses as quick as possible, because I then want to come back to Emma for a last couple of quick questions.
So I think it's important that we talk about parents, because we've talked quite a lot as well so far about older workers. And it's also worth remembering that the age profile of parents is changing quite, so that we have a whole set of demographic things there, with actually people caring for their parents and their children, not their grandchildren. So it's always worth flagging that, I think. So I think we know the childcare system is making it difficult in terms of the kind of flexibility of childcare, the way childcare works around people's working patterns, things like, you know, childcare over the summer holidays, for example, but also the sheer expense of it, which means that for many people it is not feasible to work and to use childcare. And for me, it's a lot of opportunities lost. So there are opportunities where people would like to develop their careers, go back into work, etc., but they just cannot do it because of their caring responsibilities for children. And obviously that leads to things like the motherhood penalty that we see. The IFS have done lots of research on that. So, and I think it's really important to reflect, this is not a short stage of childhood. This is not just about babies and toddlers and returning to work after having children. It's also all the way through the primary and into the secondary school years. And so that need is really important. People want to be there when their children come home from school. And so think about the number of people who are trying to work around a day. That means you can have to start over after 9, because that's the drop after to be able to get to work after you dropped your children off, and finish at say 2:30 to be able to get back to the school to pick them up, and how much of a drag that is on talent. And so I think for me that's really important. And if you add that a low income into that, that is really going to constrict your income.
Thanks, Louise. Really important, I think, that people look across the whole workforce and all the different range of people who might need workplace flexibility. We've got 2 minutes left. Emma, I just want to give a closing question to you. We've had a number of questions. I'm really sorry, everyone, we're not going to get to them all, but about, what's our advice at Timewise to people who are looking to manage different sorts of flexibilities across different parts of the organisation? Can that be done?
It absolutely can be done, and it needs to be done, because otherwise you get employee disengagement and then people will leave, and there's lots of evidence to show that. So the ways to do it, well, come and talk to us. We run a Flex Positive program that will help you to work it out. But critically, there's a number of components. One is to be really clear on the vision that you have as an organisation. So it may not be working now, but proactively articulate that you're trying to get better at it, and that you want to talk to people and listen to people, and you are open to trying to make it work for everybody. Invest in, as I said, training managers. Consult with your teams if people are getting different forms of flex or not. Understand what's actually going on, and then look at this as an organisational change process, not just as we need to fiddle with our policy. This is about investing in the way people work, and actually we've done those research to show that if you can invest in those org change processes, the return on investment is critically there, and you will get more loyal people, and they will do more for you, and they will be happier, and who doesn't want that?
Thanks so much, Emma. That's a great place to end. Look, well, I just need to say some very quick thank yous now to all of our fabulous speakers and also to our sponsors and our partners who've helped us put this event on. Thanks also to all my Timewise colleagues who have worked so hard to run this event today. And thank you most importantly to everybody on the call for joining us, for sharing all your questions and comments and insight. And we really look forward to working with all of you as we take forward the change we all know we need in flexible working that will benefit employers, employees, and is so key to securing our wider economic success. Great to have been in touch with you all. Look forward to keeping in touch. Our contact details are there. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon.